Hello, everybody. I've been asked to speak slowly in order to allow me to translate, and as an Irish person, it's very hard to do, so I'll try my best. I'm Samantha. I work as a producer and a journalist for BBC World News, but I also do a lot of work as a media trainer with BBC Media Action, British Council, Scotland, and other projects. And this evening is about tech for social good, and I wanted to talk to you all about how technology, even in its simplest form, has changed the relationship between the audience and the media, and how with that phone in your hand or that digital camera that you can in some way impact the news agenda of your local or your national or international broadcasters. And I wanted to do that by taking you on a bit of a trip around the world. Really quickly to an island in the Pacific, an African country in conflict, and an Asian country that has been under strict media censorship. So, the first place we're going to talk about is Papua New Guinea. And I worked there in 2010 with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, their international leg. And this picture was taken in Mount Hagen in the Western Highlands. Just for those people that don't know Papua New Guinea, the really mountainous area. The highlands were only discovered by Western people in 1933, 1 million undiscovered people in the highlands. I went to work with the local broadcasters in 2010, and mobile phones had just taken off in Papua New Guinea. In 2007, there was 1% of mobile phone penetration, and it continued to grow. By the time I got there in 2010, around 40%. Do you like my hat? So basically, I worked with radio journalists, but what struck me, the first thing that struck me was their one-way relationship with their audience. In 2010, the only way that the audience talked to this radio station was writing handwritten notes that they dropped into the station manager. So with these radio journalists, the first thing I did was buy them a SIM card. Just a SIM card cost 10 kina, or the equivalent of $5. And every presenter that went into the studio, we asked them to read out the number and ask people to text in. The first evening, we had 300 texts. And this has gone from a station where it had no interaction, very one-way interaction with their audience, to texts about domestic violence issues, local texts about potential corrupt politicians. They started a dialogue with their audience that they'd never done before by just using a SIM card. And that was one of the first examples for me as a journalist, how creating a two-way dialogue with your audience using basic technology can impact the news agenda. So their feature shows after they after they used the SIM card, was they started doing programs on domestic violence that they hadn't done before. They started using user comments and they got instant feedback. That was one example. The second example is from northern Nigeria in March. I was there working with a British Council project, working with journalists in northern Nigeria, in Kaduna, there's a lot of sectarian violence, and the journalists there do a lot of self-censoring. They don't know how to cover the topics because they're afraid of inciting conflict further. So we worked on phone-in programs with them. How do you talk about phone-in programs? But before we ever went to air, the first thing we did in Kaduna with these journalists was start a Facebook page and get fans and start them discussing online the conflict that's happening in Abuja and Kaduna and Kano, and start the discourse. And what that meant for the journalists was, first of all, they were less afraid to start a conversation on air. And second of all, they understood the nuances between the Muslims and the Christians and the different points of views before even going to air. That was another way that technology has changed and impacted the way audiences and media work together. And finally, my last example is from Burma, and this picture was taken last week with a group of young Burmese journalists that I trained. The project is the BBC Media Action Project, working with 100 journalists in Burma and in the border areas of Thailand.
and we were coming together to make 35 radio programs called Bingin Jizen, which is Young, Bright, Shining Stars. And even though internet penetration is so small in Burma, around 1%, technology still played a part in this project for the BBC. First of all, when we started at the beginning of the year, we wanted a safe place for the 100 journalists scattered around Burma and those in Thailand, those with internet access, to start discussing the programs. So what we did is we created a private, closed, secure Facebook group for these journalists to work on an online space to discuss the programs. And then when we actually did go to air 5 weeks ago with the first program, we started a Facebook page. So facebook.com/LLKS Radio. And what was really interesting about this is that we got fans. And that is an achievement in itself for a number of reasons. First of all, it's linked to the BBC, it's a BBC show. The fact that people in Burma feel confident enough to go online on a public space like Facebook and like a BBC fan page is an achievement, because up until very recently, associating yourself with an international broadcaster like BBC in Burma was unheard of and quite a dangerous thing to do. And the second thing for us, it helped us understand our audience. We do programs, we're planning the next 25 programs, and we have comments from our Facebook fans telling us they want to talk about drugs in Burma, they want to talk about premarital sex, which has never been discussed on radio in Burma before, and they want to talk about deforestation, things that are close to their heart. So they really have impacted what we in London, as program makers, put out on the show. And these are just 3 examples that I've worked with. But on an international scale, if you look at BBC, they have UGC, which is user-generated content. And from its inception in 2005, stories like the London bombings in 2005, the Burma protests in 2007, and even more recently, the Syria conflict, all of them have been almost led by user-generated content. Videos that people send us in are used in lead stories, comments, online, Facebook, and people's video stories. So, what I wanted to leave the audience with here now today, I know a lot of people are social media savvy and tech savvy, but a lot of social media users are what are called lurkers. So they don't engage, they just watch. But with just a simple phone, you can text into your local radio station, or an iPhone, you can take a video and send it to your national broadcaster or international broadcaster. And so you can set the news agenda from everybody to the BBC, to the CNN, to the local Kazakh press. And I think that's one of the ways you can use technology for social good. Thanks very much.